Skynyrd, start the Saturday. Welcome to Texas, post thunderstorm Texas. We had some storms roll through in the middle of the night. Scared the hell out of my chihuahua, and I had to get up and tend to her and take care of it. So I've been up pretty much since 3. I think I might have fallen off in a little bit of sleep for a little bit of while, maybe a half an hour or so. But hey, I'm up with the coffee, and it's coffee talk time. And well, I got special coffee today because I ran out of my usual crappy Folgers decaf. I'm kind of relegated to decaf in my life. It has to do with the heart condition. I seldom drink regular coffee anymore, but guess what? This morning I am sort of, kind of. I'm doing a half and half. I had a little bit of Folgers left, and I mixed it with really what's my favorite basic coffee, chock full of nuts. I don't know why. I grew up with that up around New York City area. It's very common up there, and I told Kara about it. Thought she might give it a try. We found it on a shelf somewhere. One of the stores, supermarkets here. If it's Tom Thumb or Kroger, I forget, one of them. And we brought it home. She's been drinking off of that. She likes it just fine too. So we did a little half and half mix for me this morning until I go out and get some more of my shitty Folgers. So I might get amped up before it's all done here. Who knows? It doesn't take much caffeine to really get me going, since I don't hardly take any in, right? So I got a mix. I got a mix of Folgers and chock full of nuts. So what do you get when you cross Folgers with chock full of nuts? I'd say a shitty coffee that a millionaire's money can't buy. And you would have to be from up Del Norte to understand that. Anyway, no, I'm not a fan of Folgers. I never was. It's hard for me to get a moderate nominal cheap decaf that's any good off the shelf. I got accustomed to Maxwell House decaf. They don't sell it at Walmart no more. They used to have, I'd get a big jug of it, and it was kind of cheap, and it was good enough. And when they didn't have that, I'd have to get the Folgers. And now it just seems nobody's selling that Maxwell House decaf. Maybe they ain't even making it, I don't know, or distributing it here in Texas. But the only cheap decaf is Folgers. It's garbage, and if I want to step it up from there, I'm probably looking at like $11 a pound for something like Gavalia or Starbucks or something like that. And just, that ain't worth it. It's muddy water at the end of the day. I just drink it kind of out of habit. It's just part of my life, That ain't worth all that. In fact, if there's somebody up north who wants to volunteer to go to the store and rip some decaf chock full of nuts off the shelf and send it to me, I will pay you and pay you more for that. Just let me know, I'm going to look online probably, see if I can arrange that for myself too. I'm not sure if that's possible, but we'll see. So yeah, anyway, it's Saturday. It was stormy. I'm drinking actual coffee, and I don't know, a couple things on my mind to talk about. I don't really know where to start off. I was trying to fall asleep last night after the storms came in. Chihuahua had me up, and I went on YouTube and I just started hunting around there, and I come across Phil Robertson from the Duck Dynasty TV show, the Duck Commanders and all that, and I like that guy. I like what he's got to say. Politics are pretty much sort of what I'm looking at for the most part. His understanding of the faith, which is the most important part about that guy as far as I'm concerned, is pretty much lined up with how I see things, how I believe things, and I realize it's always been a peculiar thing about me learning the Christian faith, looking to other people to see what their understanding is and kind of separating fact from fiction, against the Bible. And I always found that, no matter who I was listening to, I could like what they say and like what they say, but they always come to this 1 point or 2 points or 3 points even, where it's like, whoa, that don't make sense, and that's not what my Bible says. And I can't just follow that person, I could hear what they got to say. I could look for what's good in what they're saying. and hold to that, and I could separate what I think is garbage and just throw it away, you know, take what you want, leave the rest, sort of thing. But with Phil Robertson, you know, when he's talking scripture, when he's reading, it all makes sense to me, it all adds up to me, and I'm looking at his background, you know. He's got similar, I mean, no, I'm not a millionaire that owns 1,000 acres on a river somewhere. I didn't invent something, I don't have a whole family that got famous, not like that, but in terms of, he had an alcoholism past, he was an athlete when he was young, sort of thing. There's a little bit of basic similarities. He got over the alcohol problem with the help of the church around him, and you know, his recovery and his faith were parallel. It's a little different than mine. My faith came way after my recovery started. My faith came, what was it, 19 years after I got clean and sober. And so it's a little bit different in that regard, but I just find whatever his background is, the things that he's preaching, the things that he's teaching, it really lines up well with me, better than anybody else in this whole wide world that I've ever learned from or tried to learn from. So if you want to understand me and where I'm coming from, where my faith is concerned, the understanding of my faith, you can look to that guy and get an understanding. And Mr. Rich Henry is here. Hello, Rich. How are you? Good to see you, man. Hope things are well in California. I know they really never are, but I know they are around you because you carry Jesus in your heart, and things are basically always groovy like that. Rich is out there by Mount Shasta. He's up in Northern California. That's the good part of California, and I've driven through there once or twice. Pretty as a picture. Everything he posts up there is just gorgeous stuff. And you know, I was reading something or watching something that was talking about that the perpetual effort to try to split California into multiple states, 2 or 3 states, you know, separate Southern California from Northern California. Man, would I love to see that. I would definitely love to see that. Because, you know, I like the idea about going out to California with the gun on my hip and visiting people and seeing sights. I've been there. I stayed there for a while, and when I was in the Marine Corps, I was in Southern California. It's a gorgeous place, but I walked away from there, from Southern California, thinking, this is a great place except for the people, you know. Now I know people like Rich are out there. People have moseyed from other parts and working to make it better, but it ain't easy. And I know a lot of them are fleeing California now, coming here to Texas. So, yeah, Redding, California, right up there under Mount Shasta. What's it, I-5 run right through there. I've driven a truck through there before. Anyway, not to get hung up on California too much. I just haven't seen Rich check in lately. Thought I'd say hey, mention him, and I'm coming out here doing what I do. I come out on Saturday mornings, I do what I do, call it Coffee Talk. I start talking about my coffee so far. Here's the coffee I'm drinking out of my O'Reilly's Auto Parts mug. And I don't mean to pitch them. I seldom go there for anything. It's the mug I have for whatever reason. And I'm drinking a hybrid between Folgers decaf and chock full of nuts regular, so I'm going to get wound up in about a half an hour, and I'm going to start talking real fast and real crazy. And good to see you, my man. Good to see you. So yeah, talking about a few things as we go by here, you know. And as I was saying this morning, I got talking about this Phil Robertson. Yeah, he's a dude. I found him on TV just like the rest of us did. How many years ago? 10 years ago, whatever it was, when Duck Dynasty clan came to prominence, and it was a real special thing, a real special time for Christian people, because, or conservative people even, both, you know, if you can be conservative without a Christian faith, and there are some like that. But either way, here's an opportunity now you have on a major cable network. It was A&E back then, if I recall right, and you know, they were able to express their politics, they were able to express their faith And even in some episodes, like they closed off all their episodes at the end with the whole family gathered around at a dinner table, and they would pray. They would pray, and every once in a while they'd even sneak that name Jesus in there. You know, name of Jesus we pray. Jesus this, Jesus that. And every time they did, you know, I knew that they were getting away with something. They were getting away with TV murder. That stuff is not permitted by the powers that be, right? You know, maybe 70 years ago it was okay to do something like that, but now it's not. And 10 years ago it wasn't. But they were doing it, and that alone made me want to check in and watch and support. I'm not a big TV person, but that was interesting to me. And the more I looked into it, the more, you know, it rubbed off on me a lot. The idea of how that man lives out in Louisiana. I'm not far from here, a couple hours down the road. It's like due east, you know, down I-20 from here. And I've been there. I've been to their little factory store that they have a couple of times. I've passed through Monroe, Louisiana. I don't know how many times, a bunch, you know. But how he lives out there, kind of sort of in the wilderness, in the frontier, you know, up that Ouachita River, apart and away from everybody, doing his own thing, fishing and hunting all the time. And then spends the rest of his time with the church he's involved with up there. It's the kind of life that I would like to have, you know. And no, I don't. It isn't exactly like that, but it's as close to that as I can do with my means. And, you know, God has a place for me. God has a role for me. And it ain't that. It ain't living in seclusion. It ain't having great wealth. It ain't being famous and having all kinds of access all over the world and have people interested in what I'm saying. I have to be where people are at, apparently, you know, the city life. I don't like the city life. I like the country, but I'm in the city, and I accept that fact. You know, God has for me what he has for me, and I'm going to do with it the best I can do with it. I do the simple math. If I'm plunked down in a city and it's against my will, but it's got to be within God's will, I adjust myself to God's will and say, okay, I'm in the city. Now, why would I be in the city rather than the country? What's the basic difference between the two? The basic difference between the two is in the city, you've got people. In the country, you've got a sparse population at best, right? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done where there's a lot of people. Because we screw everything up all the time. That's what we do. You know, that's who we are. Oh, you know, I watch. We have, you don't see it in New Jersey a lot. And but down here in Texas and all through the South, you got four-way stops. Even Philadelphia's got four-way stops, right, everywhere. And you get three of them come up. Three cars come up into the intersection roughly around the same time, and you just see like how people fail at everything. Nobody knows like whose turn it is. Nobody's paying attention. You know, it just gets crazy. It's just wherever you put three people together, everything just goes. You know, I don't even know. All right, we just had a serious connection issue. I hope I didn't lose anybody, but I probably lost everybody. But I was talking about, you know, men of faith, men of Christ. They know what they're here to do. They know why they're here. It's going to involve people in all kinds of ways. And as far as I'm concerned, as old as I am, and even though I'm fairly new to the faith, I've actually been on it for a long time, you know, 12, 13 years. And I've been growing exponentially. And I still feel like I'm just starting out now. I'm just beginning. Everything I've done all these years to this point has just got me to this basic beginning. And everything that's left to happen is out there. The world is wide open for whatever role God's got for me to do in it. And I look to it with optimism. And, you know, I have that optimism now, and I see the world going on. I'm not saying the world's a great place. I'm saying God's going to do great things with me. However small or large they may be, they're going to be great. It's already great. I feel great. There's a whole crazy thing going on in our society, which I'm trying like hell to not even mention, but you can't hardly not mention it. But I'm not taking it the way so many people around me seem to be taking it. You know, it doesn't really exist to me until I hear stories from the news or something passing on Facebook, you know. My life goes on as it was, and I expect life to go on as it is indefinitely. I don't see an end in sight. I don't see this as the beginning of the end of all things. I do see it as another threat against our nation, and I don't mean medically speaking, I mean politically. I mean, there's corrupt forces, we have enemies, we've always had enemies. You know, I got enemies personally. From what I do, from what I've done, from being outspoken, you're always going to create opposition. You know, if you're going to stand up for something, you're going to get opposition. And this country stands up compared to the rest of the world as a place of liberty, as a place of what we call freedom. That doesn't mean that you're free to do whatever you want to do. All that means is that you're free from tyranny, right? Free from the oppression of government. And we've got a society where half the people are all about that and the other half are not. The other half are all sold out for destroying this country and making it like the rest of the world. Wiping out the borders and making it just another region attached to a global culture, a global economy, a global faith, global everything, right? And there's so many ultra-rich powers that be, and I say right under Satan, that want it that way. The world itself would be easier to control for controlling powerful people like that when they don't have opposition that is bent on independence and liberty. So we are, as a nation, defined by that. You know, I'm a Christian man, first and foremost, even if you put me in shackles, just like the Apostle Paul. He was preaching while he was in shackles. He was converting the security staff, the guards around him, to the faith, you know. The work doesn't stop. As long as there's somebody to hear, the mouth keeps on going. And that's who we are, and that's what we do. It don't matter. It don't matter. Come what may, the faith is first and foremost. But as long as I've got the freedom to stand up for the freedom I have, I'm going to do that. And men like me are going to do that. And there's plenty of us. So yeah, I expect life to go on and keep going on. And there is a potential for the powder keg to go off. If tyranny keeps pressing, if the tyrants keep bullying, if the liars keep lying, and the thieves keep stealing, and the evil keeps on doing corrupt and wicked things, they're going to eventually get the response that they dread. You know, and I've had it in my mind the past couple of weeks. See, I'm not about like out and out killing people. My faith, and you can argue, you know, Christian people out there who see things differently, you can argue with me on this point, but I'm not all about capital punishment. I'm not about taking a criminal and killing them off. I don't read the New Testament that way. I don't experience the New Covenant that way. I'm here to do the best I can to bring souls into salvation, to bring people into the kingdom of God. And killing them doesn't accomplish that, right? The only person who's going to die by my hand is the one who is asserting his will against somebody innocent in my presence. I'm going to defend the innocent, and if it has to be to the death, it's going to be to the death. But that aside, I'm not looking to kill nobody. I'm not looking to kill nobody at all. And I say all these things because it's like I look at the corruption in our government, our federal government, what we call Washington, D.C. You know, you see what's going on. There's a lot of people who are sold out to our natural enemy. Our natural enemy is going to be an authoritarian type of governing system, right? Because we're opposite of that. By our Constitution, our natural enemy is going to be a communist country, socialist countries, and the biggest one of them all right now is China. And obviously, some things have happened, you know. The President of the United States, who he is, as he is, has poked a stick at their hornet's nest, right? Undid pre-existing tariff agreements, and there's some retaliation happening. And those people who are doing that retaliation, they have bought and paid for so many of our government representatives, our elected officials. They are obviously sold out to that country. You can't even argue the fact, because they stand up for them in everything that they do. They stand up for all those kind of policies. You know, I'm thinking about it. In my mind, you can easily say, like, the one party is very socialist. They're oriented. They are socialist in their mind, like philosophically. And that's about what I've been thinking all this time. It's obvious for the last 20 years that that's what's going on. But more than that, they might not even be philosophically oriented to socialism or anything else. Their whole intent may be simply who's paying them the most money for them to do what they do. It's a complete sellout job. And either way, whether it's philosophical or not, it's happening that way. Obviously. So that's corruption. It's corruption, and, you know, whatever government system, whatever form of governing, whatever form of economy, anything that you lay down in paper as a scheme, as a plan, is going to be, you can only take it with a grain of salt because of the fact of the evil in our nature, right? There's going to be corruption. There's going to be crime. What I'm trying to say is, if you set up a capitalist society, for example, you have to account for the crookedness of men. You know, somebody's going to rise to power, and as soon as they do, they're going to use that power to corner markets. They're going to bully other people. They're going to even hire people to kill other people. It's like the landscape guy in the neighborhood. You know, he gets a few lawns, and then somebody else comes in and wants to cut lawns in that neighborhood. Is this guy going to go over and kill the other guy? Well, he might. He might. And capitalism doesn't account for that. Now you have to have a judicial system to set some regulations and keep some kind of balance. So even what we think is best, you know, liberty and capitalism, representational type of government, you know, republic, democratic republic, they're all going to be potentially corrupted by the criminally oriented people. And who's criminally oriented? Anybody who's desperate. And who can be desperate? Well, people who are power hungry and addicted to power. They can be very desperate. So I think there's a lot of that going on, and I think it's going to continue to impact us. I think decade by decade, those powers that be as they are working diligently to gradually, I'll use the word, progress our society further and further away from its constitutional origins. And I think what's happening here, right, with this pandemic, that's not really much of anything. I mean, it lives, it exists, people are getting sick and people are dying, but it is not what it's made out to be. It should never have shut down the economy. No way at all. I thought that from before it happened, that this should never happen. But it's happened. And I think it's happened by design. I'm not saying necessarily that the pandemic itself, the virus, was generated on purpose. It may have been. I'm not saying it's not neither. But what I'm saying is the opportunity showed itself, and then the corrupt people who were sold out to our enemy have taken full advantage of it for their own ends. Ultimately, all of these corrupt people and all of our enemies want this president that we have gone, removed, so they can return back to the way things were that benefited and profited them. So we are involved with basically a civil war. You know, it's working from the inside out by corrupt people. I got the guitar. Maybe I should just shut my face and start playing a little bit, huh? I'm remembering an old song. I hope I could pick it out. I remember used to hang out a lot with my old buddy Pat, right? Pat Healy. You all know Pat Healy, and His brother taught me a song. His brother was a pretty good guitar player. He was significantly older than the rest of us, but he would be around when he wasn't working. And he showed me a song one time, and I kind of basically remember. Let me see if I can hack my way through it for all y'all. All right? It's from a band called 10 Years After. They played at Woodstock, so we're going way back. So there's 10 Years After, and it's called I Love to Change the World, right? But I don't know what to do, so I leave it up to you. And it's kind of like that, you know? The world sucks, and you want to change it, but you don't know what to do, and you leave it up to others. And we got to watch what these others do. We got to watch what they do. These others cannot be trusted. But so many people trust, and there's another kind of division between people in general. You know, this country is cut with great polarity, probably as great as it's ever been these days between, you could say, Republican, Democrat, you could say conservative, progressive, you could say statist or federalist. You could say slave or free, right? Slave or free. And by that I mean slave to the state. You want the state to be your mama. You want the state to be your papa. There are those kinds of people, and they just live their life, you know, with the government in charge. That's not the design. It was never the design of this nation. The design of this nation was different than that. It was that we would be in charge of our own way, and the government would answer to us and mediate for us. That's what it was supposed to be. And we have this Constitution in place that works up to a Bill of Rights that we're given, and they are God-given rights as expressed by our forefathers here in this nation. And those rights were to prevent government overreach. They were not to deny us or grant us the ability to do things. It was to keep the government from trying to prevent us from having the ability to do things. So it's very important that we stand by those rights if we want to stand by the original design of this nation. So I talk about the polarity that we have here in this country. There's these kind of people here, there's these kind of people here. But what it all boils down to is you've got some people who want to continue the American experiment by its design, and then you've got other people who want to wreck it down, throw it away, and sell it out to somebody else. Okay? And you know who you are. You know, you're one or the other. You know, you want to play some in-between, call yourself independent. All right. I'm not a party guy. I think I'm technically registered to a party, but I don't really affiliate myself with it. I'm with the ideas, and I think ideas should be held, and our allegiance should be given to the group of people who are best expressing the ideas. At the time, for me, obviously being oriented as a conservative as I am, it's the Republican Party that I favor. But to me, with the corruption going on and the domination of globalists in the world, I look at it like the left wing and the right wing are wings of the same bird, right? I think there's corruption on both sides. I don't really stand tall for either of them. Am I independent? I am independent. But that's as far as parties goes. As far as who I am and how I think, I'm conservative. What do I mean by conservative? I want to conserve something. What I want to conserve is the initial original idea of this nation, the plans that were laid out, and the basis that it was founded on, right? There was God in it, because our Bill of Rights, the rights were granted, our civil rights are, by proclamation, God-given, right? That's what this country is made out of. Now, problem with that is people don't believe in God. They don't think the rights come from God, so they push God out of the way, and then they say, well, where do the rights come from? Has to be the government. So the government becomes God. So there's your other difference. You've got the faithful and the faithless, right? And there's just the divide, the polarity has become so striking, like since the time of 9/11, just more and more. The left and right, the division between, the chasm between the two, there's not a whole lot of gray area in there anymore. And the animosity has grown. People just can't talk about nothing and figure out anything. There's nothing bring us together. Nobody wants to bring us together. Nobody wants to, We're fixing for a collision. We're fixing for a collision. But that's okay. Whatever happens, I am me. I do what I do. God has given for me something to do, to accomplish, regardless of the situation at hand. And because of that, I can hold my chin up. I can keep a smile on my face. I have light in my eyes. I have grace in my walk. And I walk tall. I walk tall. Get chest out, and nothing really to bother me, Do I get bothered? I get bothered by some of the things I'm talking about here. Now, I wish it was different. I wish people were really seeking truth, not so beholden to things for more base reasons. Why would a person want to support the enemy of our nation? Well, because they're being paid for it. They're gaining, right? A senator could be making millions of dollars under the table from a Chinese, for example, right? They're sold out. And that $1 million weighs more than their ethics. It weighs more than their principles. It weighs more than their morals, as far as they're concerned. That's why people would do it, People don't want to look to Jesus Christ because they know they're doing things in their life that are unbiblical, right? Immoral, and they don't want to give them up. That immorality weighs more than the benefits that come with faith. And it's like a dog chasing its tail. It's just a never-ending thing. All you're going to get is drilled down into the ground or really dizzy or both, And you're catching nothing. You're catching nothing. Anyway, I don't know. I'm not talking about happy things. I probably should, because it's not a miserable time really for me at all. Maybe I'm just getting the bad stuff off my chest so I could go happily into my day. Happily into my day. But I can play more guitar. Last week I was talking more about music and things like that, and that's probably what y'all want to hear, right? Not my music, but just light talk that has nothing to do with all this badness going on. But I got my opinions, and I'm free to speak them, and you could listen or you could turn away. It doesn't matter. I'm just talking. I'm having my cup of coffee. I'm not drinking it fast enough. I'm not playing enough music. What can I talk about that lightens the mood? You know, I'm laughing because I had this idea come into my head earlier. I wish I could play the song, right? There was that Casey and the Sunshine Band song, that disco type of song from the 70s. I'm your boogie man, right? And I was thinking, along with all this political stuff and all these negative ideas that I've been talking about so far this morning, you know, how funny it is that, like in my whole life, I'm Generation X, right? I was born in 1967, and in my whole life, there's always been what we call a boogeyman available, right? There's the common enemy given to us by the propaganda of this nation, right? So I was born in and grew up in what we call the Cold War. So our enemy was always Soviet Union, right? Communist Russia. That was the big enemy that we had throughout my upbringing. And as I became an adult, that broke down, and then we needed new enemies, right? So instantaneously, our new enemy became Iraq, Saddam Hussein, right? And he remained the enemy off and on for a few years and gave way to Osama bin Laden. You see what I'm saying? There was always a boogeyman. That's the whole point I'm trying to make. And then, you know, after Osama bin Laden, it was just terrorism in general. So we moved from like specific people, like figurehead people, like with the Soviet Union, whoever was their dictator at the time, right? That was the face of the enemy. We also had that little moment with the Iran crisis where Ayatollah Khomeini was like our common enemy, you know, mixed into it all. So you had that, you had Brezhnev and Ayatollah Khomeini, and then it became Gorbachev after that Andropov guy for a little while who was assassinated or whatever happened with him, right? Well, we always had that common enemy. It became Saddam Hussein, which became Osama bin Laden, which became now something different, right? This whole idea of the boogeyman and in the propaganda that we're being fed in this nation morphed, not to a figurehead of a person anymore, but now to something more of an idea. And it became this terrorism, right? Quote unquote terrorism. It was an enemy in general with no real figurehead attached to it. It had been Osama bin Laden until we wiped him out, and then it just became terrorism itself. And the terrorism generated another war, and a perpetual war. You go back to the Cold War. What was going on with the Cold War, right? What was going on with the Cold War was these years and years and years of arms escalation. So you had the economies of two great nations, Russia and the United States, benefiting from all this development of arms, right? You had the military-industrial complex. You have to make these bombs, and you have to make these rifles and all these things, and upgrade them and remake them and sell off the old ones, you know? And you have industry developed against really what was a phantom enemy, because we never did fight that fight, right? It came down by other means. That's part of the idea, you know, the politics and the economics behind it all. Every time we have a boogeyman, there's some kind of war associated with it, and every time there's a war, there's money to be made. And when there's money to be made, the opportunists sweep in and capitalize hugely, right? So this is the ongoing cycle. And we got to the point where the war on terrorism became just this ongoing thing. And we've been living like that for 20 years, just about. And what? Generating all kinds of arms and sending the military all out over the world and creating economy out of that. And then, you know what, after 20 years, it starts to get tiresome. And you have a president who's actively fighting against it and winning. You start to see the end of that in sight. You need a new boogeyman. So what's a new boogeyman? Well, pandemic. Here we go. Again, it's more abstract. It's an enemy without a particular face, you know. But there's that boogeyman. I laugh about it now because, you know, I was thinking these things, but the funny part of it was, you know, when I was a little kid, like so many of us, we had uncles and parents. Some of you had like older siblings or older cousins. They would always try to scare you when you were little, like, you know, around that corner, under the bed, in that closet. The boogeyman was in there. He's going to get you. And they would say that to you, right, to try to keep you from going somewhere they didn't want you to go for whatever reason. You can't go in there. The boogeyman will get you. What the hell's a boogeyman? What's a boogeyman? Oh, the boogeyman's bad, right? I remember I did it to little kids. When we lived in Martinsville, we had the house up there, and the family was still all together down there. In the basement, we had like the furnace and all that, and I don't know, there were some little kids. There were people visiting that had little kids, and I saw one of them like trying to play with the handle on the furnace door while we were down there, right? And I didn't want him to open that door up and like stick his hand into the flames, right? So I told him, you can't do that. The boogeyman's in there. He's going to get you, right? And he's like, oh, the boogeyman. What's the boogeyman? I had to tell him what the boogeyman was, and I just made it up, right? And so he didn't want to go anywhere near that fire. And what's fun, that's funny in itself in its own way. But also, you know, as a kid growing up, my father used to call my Aunt Jerry, my mother's sister, Aunt Jerry, Boogie, as a nickname for some reason. I never got it. I don't know where it came from, but he would call her that. You know, oh, Boogie called on the phone. I think, you know, as a little kid, I'm trying to do the math. It's like, well, there's this boogeyman that's going to get me if I open up that closet door. There's this boogeyman that's going to get me if I go under the bed. There's always this boogeyman, and now you're calling my aunt, my godmother, Boogie. Is she like the boogie woman? And you know, just my little brain had to sort these things out. I find that funny. I don't know if you find that funny. But what I can't do is I can't play I'm Your Boogeyman on the guitar. That's too bad. I'm your boogeyman. That's what I am. I don't like disco, but sometimes the attitude that Casey and the Sunshine Band did, I can appreciate. The dude was fun. He played some fun kind of music that got you up and going. And I think if I could redo it, go back to my partying years, I'd probably turn up one of his songs really loud and drink heavy and just have a good time. But I don't know much about his music. I know what anybody else knows. So that was kind of fun. That was, you know, I was listening to old Johnny Cash, speaking of the old days, going way, way, way back. Again, this involves my father. He had Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire album, which I think came out in like 62 or 63. And like I told you, I was born in 67. He had this album before I even existed, right? He had a little stack of albums that go back, and they were all like the country and western types for the most part, for all parts. I remember that being what his tastes were. You got to understand, he came from Europe in the 50s, and he Americanized pretty quickly. You gotta say, he got with it pretty quick, and he had a tendency in his musical taste towards the country western stuff, which was different back then. You know, a lot of it was ballad types. Or he had like Johnny Horton, and he had Marty Robbins, of course Johnny Cash. And those guys sang a lot of ballad type of songs. They were expressing American history and expressing American folklore and patriotism out of that music. Now those guys in that generation, you know, they came out of World War II. They were enlisted. Johnny Cash was in the Air Force. Marty Robbins was, I don't remember if he was in the Army or the Air Force, but I know those guys were in the military around that World War II time, you know. Some of them a little after, but they were there. So they had patriotism in them. They had a conservative notion, and their music reflected it. So I grew up with that. You know, my father already had those albums, and he eventually gave them over to me. When I was under 10, that's what I listened to. I listened to Marty Robbins and Johnny Cash and Elvis. There was a couple Elvis albums in there, and that Johnny Horton. And I got some of those albums, you know. You can't get that Ring of Fire so far as I could see. So I don't have that on CD. But you could listen to it on YouTube. You could download it off the Apple Store. I found it on there. I actually took one song off of it that I hadn't heard in a while. But I had it in my head. I was thinking about Remember the Alamo, just in the concept. I'm in Texas now. I'm a Texan. And, you know, it behooves us here to understand the history involved. Obviously, none of my family, like I don't come from a long line of Texans. I am an immigrant, I came to Texas by choice. So I don't got that kind of history, that legacy going back. And I got no reason to take any personal pride in what had gone on at the Alamo. But the events that happened there represented the same ideas that I fall in for as an American in a big way, the idea about independence, freedom, the lack of tyranny. And there was a lot that was going on. You could look at what happened surrounding the Alamo in a lot of different ways. There was a lot of really large personalities involved that all kind of came to a point in those days at the Alamo and in the events that followed soon thereafter. And amongst those personalities was the general and president and ultimately dictator of Mexico named Santa Anna, right? Santa Anna started out favorably towards the settlers of Texas. You had two kinds of settlers from Texas: the European type, the type that came from the United States over into Texas, and then you had the Mexican type, more of the Spanish influence mixed with the native of the area. They were called Tejanos, and the ones that came from the States were Texicans. Is that how it was? I might be missing something there. So it was something like that. You had a couple, you had people that lived here, and they wanted to live in a more of a republic way, where they kind of fended for themselves, and they lived under the Mexican flag. And that was the arrangement that happened. In fact, Santa Anna did this kind of stuff. He made cheap land available so people would come and settle Texas. So it would help him develop and control and profit from Texas. It was a wide open region at that point in time. And he did that. He was selling massive, like 1,000-acre plots for pennies on a dollar sort of thing. And people were coming in, and they were agreeable to his terms, his conditions, and his outlook. They were happy to be under the Mexican flag, but then he started to change. He changed away from that and started to drive things to be a centralized government run out of Mexico City that dominated everything, instead of it being more of a republic that represented itself, And that's exactly what he drove out to come to his role as president of Mexico. Then he became his enemy. It's like the Who song, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, right? He just did what it was ever expedient, and he was starting to show signs of being very narcissistic. He was talking about becoming like the Napoleon of the West and things like that, and he did. He became a dictator, and he had a very heavy hand, and he wanted to go out and show his subjects in Texas a thing or two. He went up there with an army and started a whole bunch of trouble. There was some retaliation. There was a lot going on. But like I said, there was a lot of big personalities involved, and most of them got wiped out with the Alamo and that little bit of a war that followed thereafter, which was ultimately won by the Texans, and they became a republic of themselves. They captured Santa Anna, and they made him bow to their terms, and then he ended up living out his life to being 80-something years old, but as a wretched example of a fallen tyrant, penniless. He lost the entire Southwest after that. Crazy thing, bad thing. But so many of those personalities, you had Davy Crockett and David Bowie. I was gonna say David Bowie, Jim Bowie. Those were guys that Davy Crockett was completely nationally famous. He was like the big megastar of the time. He had been governor of Tennessee or something. Was he governor? No, he wasn't governor. He was like a senator or a representative. But he was so famous for his exploits out in the mountains in Tennessee that his notoriety afforded him an opportunity to potentially run and become president of the United States. There's my dog Henry, by the way. Say hi to Henry. And when he failed to become president, he moseyed out to Texas to see what he could make of himself out there. Big personality. Jim Bowie was also a big personality, but he did a lot of corrupt things out in Louisiana, apparently, that he pretty much got busted for. And he kind of escaped over to Texas to make a new start over there. These guys didn't survive the Alamo, and Santa Anna didn't survive. Well, he survived, but his power didn't. His rule over Texas didn't survive much longer after the Alamo. But I downloaded this song, just thinking back, the Johnny Cash song, Johnny Cash version of it, and thinking back into my childhood and everything like that, thinking of some of the principles, the principles involved around the idea of remember the Alamo, what was going on with all that. Like I said, there's a lot to it. You got to kind of stake it out for yourself. But what I see in the middle of it ultimately is a tyrant rising up in the middle of agreements between people, and then people's reaction to the tyranny. So it's similar to a story about America. It's like we had with the American Revolution against the British, right? And we're just not good. We never were good with tyrants until, the last 40, 50 years. All of a sudden, they became tolerable to us. And I say that as a collective. It ain't tolerable to me. I see any form of tyranny, and the hair stands up on the back of my neck. The hair that I used to have back there on the back of the neck, it still stands up somehow, some way. Any way, shape, or form. If I was to catch a husband abusing his wife, if there was a neighbor out in the yard slapping his wife around, I don't care if that's a domestic issue. I'd be over there. I'd be over there. My teeth would be gritted, and I'd be ready to just tear the face off the guy. It's who I am, right? Defender of the innocent, and definitely anti-tyrant. To me, that's a form of tyranny. It never comes down to having to abuse women and children to get your will. If they're not going to abide by your will, you better look at what your will is. Better look again and figure it out, and maybe adjust. Maybe you ought to step up and become a man of Christ, a man of faith, and change the way you deal with the people in your household. All right, and let's extend that household. How about to your job? You're an employer. Are you a tyrant over the people that work for you? Right? Oh, because I've seen that too. And I don't cotton to that well at all. And I don't want to get into that because that starts to get real personal. Real personal. People I know, and I got this underlying flow of magma in my soul that burns for that kind of stuff. I hate that. I hate tyranny. That's what makes me American. That's what makes me Texan. And I can stand up boldly and say that. It's who I am. It's part of my makeup. At the same time, I'm Christian. So this goes back to what I'm saying. I don't want to be killing people by my faith. My faith tells me not to be killing people. To give people every opportunity to come around to the Lord and be saved. Anybody's salvageable. Now, technically, if we get into the point where we got reprobate mind, and they're so closed off to God that God has turned it back on them, and they're not going to scream out for God because they're so closed off, well, you've got the dissolution of a potential relationship completely done. So you got a reprobate mind. Okay, that person's not salvageable. Should they be killed? Probably, but it's not for me to decide whether they're a reprobate or not. That's between them and God. But do I believe in handcuffing somebody down, jailing them down, holding them down, keeping them from perpetuating their impact on society, that negative impact? Yeah, people should be in prison, and while they're in prison, part of their suffering should have to be dealing with somebody like me. Come visit them every day. Hey, Jesus, give them that. And I know that happens. But unfortunately, in this country, with the separation of church and state, and the idea that the prisons are run by the state, it can be difficult. You know, it's a very controlled atmosphere. You can't just walk into a jail with Jesus on your heart and start preaching. There's a lot of things you got to go through, and I've done it, you know, and I'll do it again. It's worthwhile. Any time that you can get that word across to somebody is worthwhile. That's why I don't think it's worth killing anybody. And somebody who probably deserves to be dead, somebody who is beyond salvage, you just double lock the door and keep them in there forever. They'll die. They'll kill themselves. You know, riddled with devils. Eventually, you'll just kill yourself. What else? Could I play some more guitar? I had a couple of songs here. I kind of wrote them down. That's why I'm looking over here. Just kind of have them in mind as I'm talking. You know, I did Waylon. I ended with a Waylon song last week, so I could bring up Waylon again. I don't expect I'll sing it. I have sung this one before. Wordlet Surprise. This is my own rendition of it. I got the chords and I got a feel for it. And I put it in a way that works for me. Like I could play it solo, sing along to it. You know, I actually did like a recorded production of it years ago. It's out there on YouTube. If you just search by my last name, I've got a channel out there that has some music that I made in video form. A version of this song I made is out there, and I brought in like bass and drums and orchestral type of instruments. I play this strum along acoustic guitar, and I also added in some real light electric guitar work, a real nice little pretty solo on top of it. It's kind of cool. You know, it was a lot of work. It was more work than I normally do because I bothered to sing along with it. I'm not a singer, so I had to like take after take trying to stay in key and in tune with my voice. That I don't know what I'm doing, but I think it came out well. You might want to look at that, but I'll just play a piece of what I got of that here. Alright, so I sang a little tiny bit, kind of quiet under my breath. That's not my bag, that's not what I do. But that's a Waylon song, Wordlet Surprise. If you don't know that, you don't know country, you don't know Waylon, you don't know that song, look it up. Go on YouTube and say Waylon Jennings, Wordlet Surprise. Listen to that song. If that ain't the perfect country song to listen to, it is really, really, really good. It's tear in the beer, It's done well, it's arranged well, every single word is totally perfect, and you can relate to it somewhere in your life, you know. The engineering of that song is really good too. There's a really good ambiance, a really good feel. I highly recommend it. Open up your mind a little bit, open up your world a little bit, open up your musical taste a little bit, and kick the tires on that. Waylon Jennings, Wurlitzer Prize. I loved that song so much when I heard it that I endeavored to learn how to play it myself. And there you go, I just played it myself. Now, of course, that's my rendition of it, but it's still that same song. He didn't write that song, but man, he made that song great. It is a great, great country song. What else I got? I ended up talking politics the whole time I'm out there, and I up here this morning. That wasn't really my whole intention. This should be a happier time. I'm drinking regular coffee, which is rare. I should be getting amped up. I'm really not. I'm surprised by that. And nobody wants to hear somebody else talking politics all the time. I'm just talking about what's kind of on my mind here, you know. And unfortunately, I'm thin with stories in the past this morning for some reason. A lot of stuff just ain't coming to me. Yeah, there's a few things here, a few things there that popped in. You know, maybe something else before I go. I've only got one more song on my list here. Well, actually two. All right. I got music to play. I don't know how it sounds to you all out there, but I got music to play. I probably know upwards of like 500 songs, but I don't remember most of them over the years. You know, I'll sit here and I'll pick out a couple and remember parts of them here and there, but I don't really play songs anymore. But before I sat down, I was warming up a little bit. I don't want to come on here and play all rusty, you know, my fingers like logs and things like that. Shake the rust off them a little bit and try to kind of get some of that muscle memory back. And I just hit a couple of chords that reminded me of an old Led Zeppelin song that I played in my 20s. You know, when my tone deafness broke, my talent with the guitar grew exponentially all of a sudden. You know, it was like a whole new world was open to me where I could actually distinguish notes, and it just sounded so cool. I don't know exactly what happened. That's just how I think of what happened, how I think of it. But I learned a bunch of Led Zeppelin songs. I knew a bunch of Led Zeppelin songs even before that time, but I got a book that had some tablature in it, and I started just looking at some of the acoustic songs. I had bought myself a guitar. It was a pretty nice guitar. It was an electric acoustic by a company in Quebec called Seagull, right? And this is the early 90s, and I put down $700 for a guitar, which I never did. I didn't spend like that, but I did. I bought this $700 acoustic electric guitar. I chose that because I was such a Led Zeppelin fan through my life, and when I was learning guitar, I always kind of fell back to Jimmy Page and his style, and I wanted that acoustic electric because I can go both ways with that. I could plug that into an amp, I could play acoustic, and I could kick on some distortion or overdrive, and all of a sudden I got me an electric guitar. Now, they don't play the same. Obviously, the strings on acoustic are heavier. You can't really bend notes as far. Yeah, it's a different thing, but you can do, you know, I could run some Led Zeppelin riffs, you know, and then I could kick off of it and play some of the strumming stuff, more of the folk style that they did. But, you know, Led Zeppelin 3, that album had a lot of real English type of folk and Welsh type and Scottish type of folk music built into it, you know, and the structures, the chords that they used. And I like that kind of music. I did. I thought what Led Zeppelin did with that was really cool. And there was one song in there called Gallows Pole. They redid it in the 90s when Jimmy Page and Robert Plant got together and they did that Unleaded tour, which I saw. Awesome concert, probably the best concert I ever went to. It was really good. I was surprised how good it was because, you know, growing up a stoner up there in Martinsville and Bridgewater, a bunch of us, you know, we would skip school, go out to New Hope, Pennsylvania. They had a head shop over there. We'd buy pops and bongs, but they had a back room that had all kinds of bootleg albums, you know, not legal, right? Pirate stuff. And we would go back there and look for all the Led Zeppelin stuff they might have, and we would buy it up. I had one friend down in Findern, particularly. He had a lot of them, and it was great. We'd go down there, smoke weed, drink beer, listen to all these Led Zeppelin records that were pirate records you weren't supposed to have. They were all live shows from back in the 70s, and the quality was super poor, and it sounded bad. It sounded bad. You could even look at their production live album called "The Song Remains the Same," right? I think that was what, the 1973 tour. It was recorded at Madison Square Garden. I'm trying to remember, but it was as good of a production as you could have done for the live show at that time as possible, because Led Zeppelin had the money for the production to do that sort of thing, right? And it didn't sound all that great. I'm not saying it was scratchy, it was clear, but what it was missing, and what you can't know, is exactly what Led Zeppelin sounds like when you're there live. All right? What comes out on their album is way different than what it is when you're in front of them live. Their sound was tremendous. It was just tremendous. And I wasn't up front of center, right? It was an arena. It was the old Spectrum in Philly where I saw this, and my seats were first row off the floor, but about 3/4 of the way back down the hockey rink, So I was up off the floor, but in the first row. They weren't bad seats, they weren't great seats, but the sound and the power. Now, there was something else going on at that concert, too. For that album, for that show, it was a major production. That tour, they had brought in like 30 musicians. They were playing like all kinds of Moroccan instruments and Indian stuff, and they had like these little special orchestras, and man, but it was just tremendous. And they did a bunch of Zeppelin songs. They did a lot of them in a completely different style. They had different backing musicians in the band. It was just Jimmy Page and Robert Plant. John Paul Jones was off doing his stuff. John Bonham was dead. They brought in some young drummers and additional people who were good. They were very good. They made some music videos, I think, along the way. But this is one of the songs. I'm saying all that because one of the songs that they did was this gallows pole. And I was just picking away, warming up this morning. I hit some chords that I remember were in that song, These are just the chords. I'm not playing the song, but I was going through it. And I was like, oh, I remember that. That's gallows pole. And it becomes fun, If I could just kind of hack my way through it and get to the end. There's some like real heavy strumming that goes on. It really picks up, and that might be a way to just go out really good. Go out on a high note today, after talking all this somber politics crap like I've been doing. Trying to give a good mood to people who's going to bother spending some time. So let me kind of get set up here. My legs right and everything. I don't know. I can't find a comfortable spot for what I'm about to do here. Let's see. I think I'll just lean back a little bit. We'll see how that goes. Maybe I'll adjust when I start strumming. Let's see how this goes. tripped over myself a couple of times there. And I missed a chord in the transition between the introduction part and the main part. It's been years. But it's a fun song to play once you get that rhythm going. And it ends abruptly like that. Kind of like it. I was a big Led Zeppelin fan. I really was. I don't listen to it much at all anymore. But I still remember a couple of songs, a couple of them come into play every once in a while as I'm sitting around hacking around. You know, like everybody else, I could play Stairway to Heaven. I don't, but I can. And it's a pretty good song to go with, you know, because you're kind of all over the fretboard. I'm not going to play that. I'm not going to play that today. Probably just going to play out. Just play out. Get on out of here. Get on with the day. I got a lot of yard work to do. Got the St. Augustine's grass here. Rains a couple times, the sun comes out, and I got a jungle. You're really rolling good when you mess up your own song. Song. When I was starting to pick this out, work it out, develop it up, it's going to be a major production once I get my old computer up and running again, which I might start doing this weekend. I remember when I started to put that together, I liked it. It was different for me at that time. I, starting to incorporate this kind of finger picking and chicken picking into my play, and bringing bass lines and running a bass with a melody at the same time. It was all kind of new to me, and I was hacking around with these chords, and I got this flow going, what I was just playing. And when I was with the Baptist church up there in Lucas, Texas, I would come out and I would use that song as a warm-up. A lot of people are milling about, getting ready for a service, and other people will come up and start tuning their instruments and dusting everything off and flipping through all their music sheets, and I'd be up there just kind of warming up, and that was my warm-up song to play in front of the church, and there'd be a bunch of old ladies sitting out there just watching me, and I'd play it over and over again, and I just always got a good feel for that song. And it's always good things, it's always good times, it's always good memories, and I've given it a name. I'm attributing it to my wife. I'm calling it Sunflower. That's her road name. It's going to be her road name. That was decided by Luana. Luana at our church made that decision almost 2 years ago that's who Kara's going to be. She's going to be the Sunflower. So I'm calling that song Sunflower. It took me a while to develop it. I've added some parts. I've taken some parts out. I've got ideas potentially for other parts, but it's going to require other instruments. So when I get into really composing this thing, getting the software up and going, bringing other things into it, I'm going to add to it a little bit too, you know, and I'm going to have that liberty to start running like some guitar solos with my Gretsch on top of it, you know, layered out. And I think it's going to be really, 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 really cool. It's cool on its own. It's standalone good. It's just good music on an acoustic guitar. When I start adding other things to it, you know, very carefully, it could be something great as far as I'm concerned, something very listenable. Let me play it one more time through. Homegrown music. Bunch of different songs today. A lot of stupid. David Norton's here. David Norton's here. Congratulations on your new job, Dave. Good to see you. Good to see you. That's it. Wish you all a happy Saturday today. Hopefully I got you off in some kind of a mood to get up and go. I have no idea I've been going at this as long as I have. It's probably way too long. I might not be able to keep this video as long as it's gone. I forgot to write down the time that I started. But I've been at it, I've been talking, I've been playing, and my coffee's gone cold, and it's almost gone. And I got a lot of work to do. I got a lot of work to do today. So I'm going to dance between the raindrops and get done what I can get done. Maybe we do some grilling later on. It's Memorial Day weekend. You know, remember what this is about. We are remembering the fallen, those who have went out and volunteered themselves to fight for the freedom and the liberty that you and I get to live in and appreciate. Those who died so we can live this way, they also left people behind with broken hearts. You know, they grieve a loss. There's a lot of sacrifice given, and liberty don't exist without the sacrifice. Remember them. Think about your own self. What have you sacrificed so that this can be? And what potentially are you doing to cause this not to be anymore? It's the greatest country in the world. But we got issues. Remember the cost that some people paid for us to have the ability to think about this, to live this way, to mess with it, to trample on it, to rape it, to steal from it, pillage and plunder, like so many do. Remember, just remember. Vaya con Dios. Go with God.